The klaxons of Manufactorum Septimus 9 had been wailing for 3 minutes when Supervisor Kelly and Littner finally understood that this was not another drill. The acid-green emergency lumens strobed as he sprinted through the production floor, his augmetic leg protesting with each step. Around him, thousands of workers continued their sacred labor at the ammunition presses despite the alarm. They had been conditioned since birth to ignore all distractions during their shift. The Imperium's war machine demanded nothing less. Littner had been a line worker himself once, before a falling loader had crushed his leg, and the Mechanicus had deemed him suitable for augmentation and promotion. 20 years of faithful service to the God Emperor had earned him oversight of Production Block Gamma, where they manufactured standard-issue lasgun power packs by the millions. It was humble work, far from the glory of the Astra Militarum, but Littner had always taken pride in knowing that somewhere in the vast darkness of the galaxy, an Imperial Guardsman might live another day because of a power pack forged under his watch. The Vox grill in his collar crackled to life. All supervisors to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Enemy forces have breached the outer perimeter. The voice belonged to Overseer Crane, and Littner had never heard fear in it before. Not during the food riots, not during the mutant uprising in the Underhive. But now there was something else beneath the fear. Resignation. Littner reached his emergency station, a reinforced alcove overlooking the main production floor. Through the armor-glass viewing ports, he could see his workers still bent over their stations. Muscle memory and devotion kept their hands moving even as explosions echoed from somewhere far above. The Manufactorum stretched for kilometers in every direction, a city unto itself, and whatever was happening felt impossibly distant. His hands flew over the control console, fingers dancing across runes and switches worn smooth by generations of use. Emergency protocol demanded the immediate cessation of all production and the evacuation of non-essential personnel. But as Littner looked out at the thousands of workers under his command, he hesitated. Non-essential. The phrase tasted like ash. Every single person on that floor had been born into service, had spent their entire lives in devotion to the Emperor's great work. How could any of them be non-essential? The decision was taken from him when Junior Supervisor Hadrek burst through the door, her face pale beneath the industrial grime. "Sir, we've lost contact with Blocks Alpha through Delta. The enemy. They're already in the upper Manufactorum. Overseer Crane is dead." She paused, swallowing hard. "They say it's xenos." Littner felt his augmetic leg lock momentarily, a habit it had developed when he was stressed. The Tau. He had heard whispers of their expansion, their insidious doctrine of the so-called greater good. But here, Septimus 9 was 3 systems from the nearest front. How had they come so far without warning? "How many defenders do we have?" Littner asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "The PDF garrison was reduced last month, transferred to support the crusade. We have maybe 300 men, mostly ceremonial guards and enforcers." Hadrek's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "Against a full Tau incursion force. 300 against Emperor knew how many." Littner closed his eyes for a moment, offering a silent prayer. When he opened them, his resolve had hardened. "Then we make our stand here. Hadrek, I want you to take emergency exit 7. Get to the Underhive, warn them." "Sir, I won't abandon. That's an order, Junior Supervisor." His voice carried the weight of authority that 20 years had earned him. "Someone needs to survive to bear witness." Hadrek's jaw tightened, but she nodded. As she turned to leave, Littner called after her. "Tell them Manufactorum Septimus 9 stood until the end. Tell them we did our duty." When she was gone, Littner turned to the Vox system. His finger hovered over the general address button. Below him, the workers continued their endless labor, unaware that death approached on silent anti-grav engines. He could evacuate them, send them running into the maze of service tunnels and maintenance ways. Some might even escape. But he knew with cold certainty that the moment production stopped, the moment those power packs stopped rolling off the line, guard positions across the sector would begin to feel the pinch. How many loyal soldiers would die because their Lars weapons ran dry? The Emperor asks only that you do your duty, Nothing more, nothing less. Littner activated the Vox. Workers of Production Block Gamma, this is Supervisor Littner. The enemies of mankind are among us, but our duty remains unchanged. Every power pack you complete is a prayer to the Emperor. Every round you forge is a denial of the alien threat. We stand at our posts. We maintain production. We are the hammer against which the enemies of humanity will break. He saw heads turn below, workers looking up from their stations. Then, one by one, they returned to their work. But something had changed. Their movements were sharper now, more purposeful. They understood. The first explosion shook the Manufactorum proper 20 minutes later. Dust rained from the ceiling as ancient girders groaned. Through the viewing port, Littner watched a section of the far wall simply cease to exist, replaced by a cloud of atomized rockcrete. Through the breach came shapes, tall and slender figures in armor the color of desert sand. Tau fire warriors, their pulse rifles sweeping for targets. The Manufactorum's defenders responded immediately. Las fire erupted from prepared positions, the sharp crack of infantry weapons mixing with the deeper thunder of heavy stubbers. Littner watched a fire warrior stumble and fall, its armor cracked by concentrated fire. Behind them came larger shapes, crisis battlesuits that bounded forward on jets of flame, their weapons reducing entire defensive positions to molten slag. Still, the workers continued their labor. Littner's hands moved across his console, activating systems that hadn't been used since the Manufactorum's construction. Defense protocols from the dark age of technology, when humanity had built its great works with the expectation of siege. Blast doors slammed shut, sealing off sections of the Manufactorum. Emergency barriers rose from the floor, creating kill zones and defensive positions. It wouldn't stop the Tau, but it would slow them. Through the chaos, Littner's mind drifted to memories of his childhood in the Hab block. His mother had worked line 12 until her fingers had worn down to bone. His father had died in a chemical spill when Littner was 7. Just another industrial accident in a galaxy that ground through human lives like grist through a mill. But they had been proud, both of them. Proud to serve, proud to contribute their small part to the Imperium's survival. His mother's last words, gasped through lungs scarred by decades of toxic fumes, had been a prayer of thanks that she had lived to see her son promoted to line supervisor. An explosion, closer this time. Through the smoke, Littner saw the xenos' filth advancing through the main entrance to Block Gamma. Their movements were precise, coordinated, covering each other as they eliminated the few defenders who tried to stop them. Behind his workers, Littner saw the massive doors to storage Vault 7, where a week's worth of completed power packs waited for shipment. Millions of rounds, enough to supply an entire regiment. He made his decision. All workers, he spoke into the Vox, his voice carrying over the sound of gunfire. Continue production. Do not stop. Do not falter. Your duty is to the Emperor. Then he was moving, his augmetic leg carrying him down the metal stairs 3 at a time. He grabbed a Lars rifle from a fallen enforcer, checking the charge. Full pack, 90 shots. He'd helped forge billions of these packs, but had never expected to use one himself. The production floor was a cathedral of industry, stretching beyond sight in every direction. The ceiling disappeared into darkness, broken only by the occasional luminator or shower of welding sparks. Workers stood at their stations like statues, only their hands moving in the practiced rhythms of their craft. They did not look at the advancing xenos. They did not flinch at the sound of pulse fire. They simply worked. The first Tau warrior to enter the production floor moved with casual confidence, its weapon sweeping across the rows of workers. Littner put a Lars bolt through its helmet before it could fire. Suddenly, the air was full of pulse fire as its squadmates responded. Littner dove behind a massive stamping press as shots seared the air where he'd been standing. Around him, workers began to fall. Pulse weapons tore through their thin protective gear, dropping them at their stations. But those still standing continued their work. Littner saw Mareska, a woman who'd worked line 7 for 30 years, complete a power pack even as blood ran down her arm from a grazing hit. She placed it on the conveyor with the same precision she'd shown every day of her adult life, then collapsed. Rage filled Littner, hot and pure. These xenos dared to interfere with the Emperor's work. They dared to spill loyal blood on sacred ground. He rose from cover, Lars' rifle spitting coherent light. His shots were not those of a trained soldier, but they were adequate. Another fire warrior fell, then another. But more kept coming, and Littner felt the telltale heat of his power pack depleting. Around him, workers were dragged down by pulse fire, but others stepped forward to take their places at the production lines. He saw Jordak, barely 16 and 2 weeks into his first rotation, manually operating a press after its operator had fallen. The boy's hands moved with desperate precision, maintaining the sacred rhythm of production even as tears streamed down his face. The Tau advanced, their doctrine of covering fire and mutual support turning the production floor into a killing field. But something strange was happening. As workers fell, others would step over their bodies to take their places. Not under orders, not through fear of punishment, but through simple, absolute devotion. The production lines never stopped. The conveyor belts continued their endless journey toward the storage vaults. Littner saw old Hazek, who had been declared too infirm for duty 5 years ago, hobble from his habitation unit, still wearing his sleeping robes. The ancient worker climbed over the safety rail and took position at an abandoned station, his arthritic hands somehow remembering the patterns they had traced for 60 years. A pulse round took him in the chest moments later, but not before he had completed 3 power packs. A child, no more than 12 and clearly on work study from the Skolam, emerged from beneath a conveyor belt where she had been hiding. Without a word, she took position at a quality control station, her small hands checking each pack for defects as they rolled past. The battle raged across the production floor, a swirling melee of Lars fire and pulse rounds, of screaming machinery and dying workers. Littner found himself pushed back, step by step, toward the storage vaults. His Lars rifle drained, he grabbed another from a fallen guard. How many had he killed? 5, 10. It didn't matter. They kept coming, their advance as inexorable as the tide. A pulse round caught Littner in the shoulder. His augmetic leg compensated for the sudden shift in balance, keeping him upright. The Lars rifle fell from nerveless fingers as he clutched at the wound. The Tau advanced, their movements careful and measured. They could afford to be patient. They had already won. But as Littner looked across the production floor, he saw something that made him smile through the pain. The conveyors were still running. Workers were still standing at their posts, hands moving in the patterns drilled into them since childhood. Even as pulse fire filled the air, even as their fellows fell around them, they maintained production. A Tau warrior approached Littner, its weapon trained on his head. Through its helmet's speakers came a translated voice, mechanical and emotionless. "Surrender, accept the greater good. Your death serves no purpose." Littner spat blood. "My death serves the Emperor. My life serves the Emperor. Every breath I draw, every beat of my heart serves the Emperor." He gestured weakly toward the production lines. "Look at them, xenos. Look at what you cannot understand. They know they're going to die, but they continue their work. Because duty is its own purpose. Because service is its own reward." The Tau warrior tilted its head, a gesture almost human in its confusion. "Illogical, continued resistance only increases casualties. Your production serves no tactical purpose." "No," Littner agreed, feeling his strength ebbing. "Every power pack completed is a statement of faith. Every worker who dies at their post is a martyr. You may take this Manufactorum. You may kill every human within its walls, but you will never break our spirit. And one day, those power packs will find their way to loyal hands. One day, the guard will come, and they will have ammunition forged by martyrs' hands." The Tau warrior was silent for a moment. Behind it, Littner could see its comrades advancing through the production floor. They moved with increasing confusion as workers ignored them entirely, continuing their labor even as pulse fire cut them down. One fire warrior had stopped shooting altogether, standing frozen as he watched a worker with half her face burned away carefully calibrate a power coupling before collapsing. "Your species is insane," the Tau warrior finally said. "You worship death, you celebrate suffering. The greater good offers peace, prosperity, purpose. Littner laughed, a wet sound. We already have purpose, alien. Watch. He raised his voice, though it cost him. Workers of Block Gamma, show these xenos what purpose means. Show them what faith achieves. And across the production floor, something extraordinary happened. The workers began to sing. It started with one voice, cracked and worn, rising above the sound of machinery. The hymn of accumulated labor, a work song as old as the Manufactorum itself. Then another voice joined it, and another. Soon, hundreds of workers were singing as they worked, their voices creating a harmony that transformed the industrial cacophony into something approaching the divine. The Tau warriors actually stepped back, weapons lowering slightly. In all their conquests, in all their battles against the forces of the Imperium, they had never encountered anything like this. Workers sang as they died. They sang as they stepped over the bodies of their fellows. They sang as pulse rounds burned through their bodies, and through it all they never stopped working. This is faith, Littner told the Tau warrior. This is what you face when you attack the Imperium, not just soldiers, not just weapons, but the accumulated devotion of trillions of souls, each one willing to die at their post rather than abandon their duty. You offer the greater good. We are the greater good. We are the thin line between humanity and extinction. Every one of us, from the highest Lord Commander to the lowest Manufactorum worker. The Tau warrior raised its weapon again, but before it could fire, a massive explosion shook the Manufactorum. Through the smoke and flame, Littner saw figures in crimson armor charging through the breach. Skitari, the Mechanicus, had come. Their galvanic rifles spoke in crackling torrents, cutting down Tau warriors. Behind them came heavier units, Cataphren battle servitors that filled the air with phosphor and plasma. But the Skitari were not alone. Behind them marched PDF troopers, their uniforms scorched and bloody, clearly survivors from other parts of the Manufactorum who had regrouped and counterattacked. And behind them, incredibly, came workers. Armed with industrial tools, welding torches, and improvised weapons, they fell upon the Tau with a fury born of righteous anger. They were not soldiers, had never been trained for combat, but they fought with the desperation of those who had seen their life's work threatened. The Tau line wavered, then broke. Fire warriors fell back in good order, their training evident even in retreat. The crisis suits bounded away on pillars of flame, covering their smaller brethren. Within minutes, the production floor was clear of living xenos. A tech priest approached Littner where he lay, mechadendrites writhing as it assessed his injuries. Supervisor Kelly and Littner, your biometrics indicate critical damage. Probability of survival, 17%. Do you wish to receive the Omnissiah's blessing of augmentation? Littner turned his head, looking at the production lines. Workers were already returning to their stations, stepping over the bodies of friend and foe alike. The machinery had never stopped. Production had never ceased. The hymn continued, softer now, a memorial for the fallen even as it celebrated the continuation of their work. Will I be able to return to my post? He asked. Affirmative. Enhanced efficiency probable. Then yes. Littner closed his eyes as the tech priest's servo arms extended. But first, tell me, the power packs, did they make it to storage? Affirmative. Production quotas exceeded by 12% despite enemy action. The Departamento Munitorum has already flagged the surplus for priority distribution to frontline units. Littner smiled as darkness took him. Somewhere out there, a guardsman would squeeze the trigger of their lasgun and find one more shot than expected. One more chance to serve. One more moment of defiance against the dark. When he woke 3 days later, more machine than man, the first thing Supervisor Kelly and Littner did was check the production reports. They had not missed a single shift. The workers had maintained full production throughout his augmentation, throughout the cleanup of Xenos' bodies, throughout the repairs to damaged machinery. The work had continued, because the work must always continue. The Departamento Munitorum conducted its investigation with typical thoroughness. Officials in stark grey uniforms walked the production floor, taking testimony from survivors, cataloguing the damage, calculating the cost. They interviewed Littner extensively, recording every detail of the battle, every decision made, Every protocol followed or ignored. They also authorized a memorial, not a grand monument or an ornate shrine, but a simple brass plaque mounted on the wall of Production Block Gamma. Upon it were etched the names of every worker who had died at their post, and above them a phrase that Littner himself had suggested: "Production continues." The workers of Block Gamma developed a tradition. Before each shift, they would touch the plaque, a momentary gesture of remembrance and resolution. The brass grew smooth and warm from countless hands, a physical connection between the living and the dead, between duty performed and duty ongoing. Hadrek returned a week after the battle, leading a column of PDF reinforcements from the Underhive. She had expected to find ruins, had prepared herself to bear witness to massacre. Instead, she found the Manufactorum fully operational, its defenders victorious, its production uninterrupted. When she saw Littner at his station, more augmetic than flesh but still undeniably himself, she wept. "I thought I would be telling tales of the dead," she said. Littner replied, his voice carrying a sober tone. "The dead served their purpose. Their duty is complete. Ours continues." Life in the Manufactorum returned to its rhythms, but something fundamental had changed. The workers moved with a new purpose, a new pride. They had been tested in the crucible of war and had not been found wanting. They had stood at their posts. They had maintained production while the world burned around them. Through it all, production continued.